Hello, welcome to St Philip's Church Hill. If I can have your attention for a moment. My name's Justin Moffat. I'm the minister of this church, and we want to welcome you here today. In fact, we don't just want to welcome you. Here we are. We welcome you to our church today. I'm hoping that the rain. It's nice to be inside. From the rain, you'll hear the 18th century roof as the rain hits it, and at points that's a little bit distracting, but I hope you can set it aside. I hope you have a glass of wine or a drink in your hand and some food that's been prepared for you, and I hope that you enjoy it while you eat. We begin the season, really, of Christmas. It's actually an ancient season called Advent, but let's call it Christmas for the moment. And we're doing a fair amount of things during the season, mostly on Sundays, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of our service. But we're calling the season "The Weary World Rejoices." It comes from an old carol, and it's a beautiful line that the world might be weary, it might have a sense of heaviness about it, and yet there's something in the Christmas story that allows a person to rise above the weariness and in fact rejoice. And we're saying Christmas is a part of that story. It's not the full story, it's a part of that story. And so today we're addressing the question, why Christmas? And we've invited here today Dr. John Dickson. Welcome, John. Do you want to give him a round of applause just for that worth doing? We've been working with John Dickson all year. This might be your first introduction to John, but we've been working as a church with John Dickson all year because we believe John has particular gifts in communication and in just reaching people where they're at and explaining why the Christian message is so important. And so we've invited him here today to talk on this topic of why Christmas. He is a pastor in a former life. He's also a writer. In fact, I'll tell you about a book in a few moments' time. He's also an academic at the University of Sydney and Macquarie University. And he's particularly gifted, I believe, in explaining the simplicity of the Christian message in a way that might make someone say beforehand, I wasn't sure, but now I want to look into it. Before it seemed a little strange, now it seems less strange. Or maybe even more, before I didn't believe it, and then I walk out of the building saying, actually, you know what, this happens. Actually, I think I believe it, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time. No matter where you are welcome here today, and I hope you experienced that welcome as you came in. We do apologise for the COVID distance, which means that people can't meet each other more easily, but that's the season that we're in. Let me tell you where tonight's going. We're going to hear a message from John. He's going to explain why Christmas. Then we're going to give you the microphone, if you'd like the microphone. We're going to give you the microphone where you get to make a comment or ask a question of John, who will offer an answer or move towards an answer in the case of some of the questions. So we're going to give you the microphone, and when that happens, I'll be the one who has the microphone. I will take it to you, and because we're COVID safe here, I will keep the microphone in my hand, and I'll just pop it under your nose, if I can put it that way. Now, that requires you to think, actually, when I'm listening to the talk, what are the questions I have? Like if you'd like to ask a question and the microphone's going around, you think, what's my question? The key moment to think, what is my question, is in the middle of John's talk, and then maybe if you have a pen, you could perhaps write it down or mark it on your phone or something, so that when it comes time for the questions, you'll be able to remember what it is that you'd like to ask. So that's what's going. John? Then a question time. Then at the end of it, I'm actually going to give you the chance to take away a book. You might have already taken one on your way in, a book called Why Christmas. That's by Nikki Gumbel. It explains why Christmas. So it's an addition to what you're hearing tonight. But I would also like you, if you'd like to take it, John's book, or one of John's books, A Doubter's Guide to Jesus. A Doubter's Guide to Jesus. By the way, thank you to the musicians. Do you want to give them a round of applause? Isn't it beautiful to come in and hear the carols? It's so nice to hear carols that aren't in a shopping centre. It's so nice to hear carols where somebody's not trying to make you buy something, where we're here to give you something. So we're really thankful to the Church Hill singers as they sung to us just a few moments ago. And at the end of the service, I want to invite you to the many services that we're running during the season in the parish of Church Hill. So, Christmas. My Christmas tree went up today. My wife put together the decorations with my 5-year-old, and my 15-year-old daughter came home upset because half the tree was decorated. She wanted to decorate the whole tree. Have you ever had that experience? Such is the nature of Christmas. There's something about the season that people actually say, I want to put up a Christmas tree. I want to put the lights up. There's just something about the season. And so we want to dig a little bit deeper. We want to say beyond the obvious, what's going on? Why is it so important? John, do you want to come forward? This is John Dickson. John, we ask you questions fairly regularly when you come here, but we always ask the same first question, namely basic details. Let us know a little bit about your...
So I should get that one right.
Yeah, a little bit about where you live, family life, etc.
I live on the North Shore. I'm married to Elizabeth, who answers only to Buff. I have 3 kids, 2 of them still living at home, 1 dog, 2 chickens.
Okay. And you are a writer. Could you give us a sense of how many books we're talking about?
I honestly don't know.
Okay, approximately?
Somewhere lower than 20, but I'm not sure how much lower.
Okay,
above 15 and lower than 20.
We've got one to give to you tonight, but if, I guess, Googling John's name or going to your website will be a way to access those books. If you had to put a single plumb line through all of those books, it's a challenge. If you had to put a single plumb line through all of those books, I presume there's not one on mechanic, motorcycle maintenance or something. Is that right?
No.
So there's a plumb line through them all. What do you think the plumb line is?
It might not be a theme, but a stance, a position. So I've always felt a great empathy and affinity with people who doubt the Christian faith, who don't have any idea if it's true or not. There are too many questions. And I've felt a great affinity with that kind of person. And so when I write a book, I nearly always have them sitting in my office with me.
Okay. Silently, I presume.
Sure.
Or speaking to your heart. Now, Christmas coming up. Christmas is a strange story. We're going to hear you talk about it in a few moments' time. But, when the world tries to say, how can it better itself, or what are the cures to the world's problems, or what are the solutions, normally the answers are something to do with education or politics or trade or perhaps personally acquiring things or family life, or there's any number of things that people say is the solution to the world's problems, or at least towards them. And yet Christians come along and say, oh, Bethlehem, a little baby was born. And somehow we say that's at the heart of everything.
Yeah.
Now, you might not want to preempt your talk, but, what do you think's going on there?
Well, I reckon if you give this length of thought, even more important than education and science and even history, is what you might call virtue. A virtuous life is the ultimate life. And I'm very influenced by the ancient Greek philosophers, and they said happiness is found in virtue, where you live in relationship with others who are virtuous, right? Now the thing is, you can try and study tomorrow and do really well. Try to be virtuous tomorrow without any fault. Yeah? Give it 24 hours. Surely you should be able to complete 24 hours. And I think everyone admits they can't. We don't live up to our own standards, let alone the Almighty's, if the Almighty exists. So I genuinely think virtue is the key. It's the key to peace, it is the key to education, it's the key to relationships. Now, the Christmas narrative, the whole Christian narrative, isn't about making us virtuous, but it is firstly about answering how we can be acceptable to the God of the universe without being virtuous, because we've failed him. And he has come to show us love. so that we know despite our lack of virtue, we are loved. And then here's the twist. That becomes the animating principle of love, of virtue. If you can wake up each morning genuinely thinking the creator of the universe loves you despite your many failings, that animates a life of love.
And you can see why Christians for 2,000 years have called this good
Sure.
Good news.
Yeah.
It's good news. Yeah. My last question before I release you on us all is about the culture we live in. We were just chatting a few moments ago and we're saying, it's funny thing is Christmas doesn't seem to have changed. You know, the tree goes up, the carols are the same, the desire to feel the season in some form, to get together with family, those sorts of things haven't changed. And yet Christianity in society has definitely changed. I would have thought that, say, 50 years ago, there might have been a fair amount of pressure to be Christian, even if people weren't. There was a sense that this was the right thing to do and you felt pressure if you weren't. These days there's pressure not to be.
Yeah.
Pressure not to be. Which puts people who doubt sometimes in a difficult spot because they feel pressure not to pursue it. And I want to ask you, I presume you've felt pressure over the years to give up your faith. How do you handle the pressure and how did you keep your faith? How did you do it?
My problem is I actually think it's true.
Okay. So you're locked in that sense.
I'm locked in. I just think Christianity is true. And if I didn't, I'd give it up tomorrow and go and teach history somewhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's not a very cool answer, but that's my answer.
Right, and it's something to interact with. And when we come to the question time in a few moments' time, you might even like to ask him, not just about his presentation, but about that particular answer or anything we've just spoken about.
Sure.
John, you're welcome here.
Thanks, man.
Let us know some thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Justin, for the invitation. I don't know how many times I've spoken here, right here, sometimes up there, but this is rapidly becoming my happy place. So thank you for the warm welcome I've received for those who are regulars here. About 3 centuries before the first Christmas, the smartest man in the room, the Athenian philosopher Aristotle, wrote a compelling book about how we come to believe what we believe, how we form our opinions, how we feel drawn to certain ideas and repulsed by other ideas. Now, this concept of belief formation has actually become a really sexy topic in the last 10 years or so. Some of you will know the screamingly popular book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind, which is all about the psychology of belief. And he makes the point that rationality plays only a part in belief and decision-making. More recently is a book about the science of belief by Gareth Lang of the University of Edinburgh. And he makes the point that the hypothalamus, the emotion center of the brain, drives a lot more of our beliefs and our decision-making than we ever thought before. And they can actually test for this. So it's become a really cool topic. How do beliefs form in a human being? But Aristotle, 3 centuries before the first Christmas, argued that there are 3 factors in belief formation. And it's interesting that both the psychological and sociological and scientific data about belief formation really have only confirmed what Aristotle stumbled upon 3 centuries before Christ. He said there is logos, that is a rational element in the way we come to believe things. We are rational creatures, and when we find evidence or good argument, we do find ourselves compelled. That's kind of obvious. The thing is, he spotted And the new research confirms that we do not make our minds up on all sorts of important topics based only on logos, only on the rational element. He said there is also ethos. This is the ethical or moral dimension. So he said that when we think an idea is good, ethically, we are drawn to it. And when we think it's bad or has bad effects, or the person telling us the idea is bad, we're repelled by the idea. And he said it's a fool who thinks they only operate as logos. There is also ethos. He also said, importantly, that there is a pathos. This is the aesthetic, we might say emotional dimension of belief. Being sort of emotional creatures, we are drawn to the beauty of some objects, some ideas, and repelled by others. And it's different for different people. And he made the case that this is true in politics, in morality, in philosophy. We could add science. We can certainly add religion. We don't make up our minds based only on rational thought. There is also a moral dimension. And there is an aesthetic dimension. If I can put it in my own terms without the fancy Greek words, true, good, and beautiful. Whether conscious or not, we're always assessing whether something is true, good, and beautiful. Now, I was given the topic tonight. I had no say in it. Justin, just said, here is your topic. And I decided why Christmas could be interpreted through Aristotle's grid. Does that sound okay? Yeah? I want to try and answer the question, why I think Christmas is true, good, and beautiful. Logos, ethos, pathos. Firstly, it's true. Now, I'm not going to say much about this. Those of you who heard me speak before know that I often do too much on this sort of thing. So I thought I'd just sneak a little bit in tonight. You know, every Christmas, just about, the media drops in some article or documentary disproving the whole show. You can almost set your clock by it. Oh, another debunking Jesus article, it must be Christmas, right? You watch. It'll happen this week or the next, for sure. There was a really famous one just a couple of Christmases ago in the Washington Post that asked the question at Christmas time, did historical Jesus really exist? The evidence just doesn't stack or add up. And the article concluded very confidently, in sum, there are clearly good reasons to doubt Jesus' historical existence, if not to think it outright improbable. Well, I'm not going to make the claim that we can demonstrate the details of the Christmas narrative. But I do want to say, in contradiction to this Washington Post article, that the basic fact of Christmas is beyond all professional historical doubt. This is not just a comment I can make in the safety of this lovely Christmassy church. No, you can go to any classics department or ancient history department anywhere in the world, and you will not find even one professor who thinks Jesus did not actually live as an historical figure. The fact of his birth, his existence, his teaching, his reputation as a healer, and even his death on a cross are regarded as beyond all doubt by secular historians. Now, I can prove that this is the case. I can prove that there is this consensus amongst scholars, because there are these secular compendiums of ancient history that even the most nerdy professors of ancient history have on their shelf, if they can afford them, and always consult when, we can't quite remember who Seneca's wife was, right? You go to these compendiums of historical knowledge, and every one of them has sections on Jesus. Some of you will know the Oxford Classical Dictionary, 1,600 or so pages, one volume compendium of all that we know from Greek and Roman antiquity. And there is, yes, a section on Jesus that makes it abundantly clear there is no doubt in historical scholarship that he really did exist as a teacher and martyr in the ancient world. You can do the same with the Cambridge Ancient History, Volume 10, which deals with the Augustan period, our period. And there's a very lengthy chapter on the birth of Christianity in the Roman world, and the first few pages are all about what we can know of the historical Jesus. And if you read it, you will see for yourself, amongst secular scholars, there is zero doubt raised about the broad outline of Jesus' life. Or if you are a real glutton for punishment or nerd, whichever way you want to look at it, the state-of-the-art compendium of historical knowledge is Brill's New Pauly in 22 volumes. And if anyone has a lazy €6,000 and you want to buy that for me for Christmas, I'd be most obliged. But here in the New Pauly, there is a 5,000-word essay on what historians agree on about the life of Jesus. 5,000 words. And there is zero doubt about the broad outline of his life. My point is that whichever way we look at it, there really was a first Christmas. Whatever quibble you might have about the details, there really was a time in the Roman East when Jesus of Nazareth was born. And you can investigate that with skeptical muscles fully flexed. Take your best shot, and the historical Jesus will just still be standing there, smiling sweetly, looking back. There is to Christianity, to the Christmas story, logos, rational evidence. But I don't want to leave it there, even though that is my other happy place. There is also ethos. Ethos. There's a goodness at the heart of the Christmas narrative. Aristotle described this aspect of belief formation in these words. There is persuasion through ethos, character. For we believe good-hearted people to a greater extent and more quickly than we do others on all subjects in general, and completely so in cases where there is not exact knowledge but room for doubt. It is not the case, as some of the technical writers propose in their treatment of the art, that good-heartedness on the part of the speaker makes no contribution to persuasiveness. Rather, character is almost, so to speak, the controlling factor in persuasion. It's a very simple but also profound insight. The most believable person in the world is the one you know has your best interests at heart. One of the things that makes us so skeptical nowadays is that we always worry about the ethos of people with a message. We worry that people who have a message are in it for themselves, that it's a power grab, that this is a message designed to get something for the persuader and give nothing to the persuaded. And this is true in politics, it's true in the sort of climate debates, it's true in ethics, it's true in religion, yes. We question the ethos of a thing, and we find ourselves not believing it. We fear that we're listening to bullies who are trying to have their way with us. On this score, there is something good about the Christmas narrative, because it is the opposite of the bully story. The opposite of the story that's about self-interest, about having its way with you. This is really clear in a lot of the famous Christmas passages, which if you go to church this Christmas, you'll certainly hear this one. But just listen to the theme of the lowliness of the story in the midst of a world full of bullies. Luke 2, in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. At the very time the bully of the Roman world, Augustus, was flexing his muscles in a worldwide census, the story of Jesus is taking place in a little town where he is born to peasant parents and there's no room. And so he's laid in an animal feeding trough. That's important to underline. Manger is not the special bed reserved for the Son of God. Manger just means animal feeding trough, right? Or the animal feeding area of a house. The point I'm trying to make in this is that this is a lowly story. It's not about power and show, but about service. And what's more, the very texts that record these lowly events are themselves lowly. What do I mean? I mean, the New Testament texts focus on lowly, non-elite people. They were written by lowly, non-elite people. It is written in a form of the Greek language that is the lowly, non-elite form of Greek. And for our first 300 years of copying the New Testament, we can tell the people who copied it out were non-elite scribes. Everything about this story is good. It's not the bully. What's true of the story is true of the very texts that tell the story. It's not the propaganda of the powerful. It is the testimony of the humble. There's a goodness here. I find it compelling. Now, I know that the church hasn't always acted in this lowly way. It's true in church history. The church has been a bit of a bully. But all I want to say is the original story and the original text and the original copies of the texts were about as far from being a pushy bully that wants its way with you than you can possibly imagine. Christmas is true. It's good. And finally, pathos. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Now, of course, I say that in a beautiful church. Obviously, the trappings of Christmas are beautiful. The lights, the trees, the beautiful hymns, the food we're all going to eat too much of, the presents. I mean, we make it beautiful, but these are additions. These are trimmings. In some way, the original Christmas story wasn't beautiful at that level. No one was, lighting candles and singing hymns and, giving presents, at the first. I mean, yes, the wise men were giving presents. Long after the Christmas, by the way. But it was a lowly, smelly, ugly event. And yet the idea at the heart of the event is what I'm saying is beautiful. And so it's fitting that we adorn Christmas with these trinkets of beauty as just little reminders that behind it all there is a beautiful idea. The Almighty Creator entered into our flesh. That's the most beautiful Christmas idea. The Almighty Creator entered into our flesh in Jesus Christ. Behind all the decorations, that is the theme. You find it in the opening of John's Gospel. All the Gospels have their own way of saying this, but John says it particularly well. In the beginning was the Word. Interesting, it's the word logos, by the way. And the word logos was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. It's beautiful. And then there's that beautiful rendition from the famous Mendelssohn carol. Music is beautiful, but I want to say the idea in the music is beautifuler, to invent a comparative. But not everyone finds it beautiful. Not everyone finds it beautiful. I interviewed just last week a Muslim woman, Mariam, who told me about her journey of trying to get her head around Christmas and the whole Christian faith. And she said she was raised to see this fundamental idea of Christmas, of God entering our flesh, as disgusting. That was her word. Why? I asked. She said, because you are associating a created thing with the infinite creator. You are debasing God. You can see the logic, right? Within an Islamic frame of mind, Christmas does a disservice to the Almighty. It is not beautiful. Things have radically changed for Mariam, which is not her real name, by the way. She came to realize that this doctrine of God becoming flesh was not the invention of Christians who tried to debase God by placing him in a manger, and debase God by having him on his knees, washing the disciples' feet, and debasing God by having him die on a cross. She realized, no, this is God debasing himself, and that's a totally different thing. We have no right to insist that God be debased. We have no right to imagine God debased, but God has every right to do so in his love. It was put beautifully 1,600 years ago by the smartest man in the world since Aristotle, Augustine, in one of his sermons for Christmas, around the year 400. He lies in a manger, but he holds the world in his hand. He is nourished at the breast, but he feeds the angels. He is wrapped in swaddling clothes, but he clothes us with immortality. He is suckled, but is adored. He does not find room in the inn, but he makes a temple for himself in the hearts of believers. For strength took on weakness, that weakness might become strong. Therefore, let us marvel at, rather than despise, his human birth. My friend Mariam herself came to give up despising this, and now she marvels at this idea. In fact, if she were here, she would say to you in her inimitable fashion, "This is the most beautiful idea in the world. And it is good through and through. And it is true." Thank you.
You could clap if you like, you know. You don't have to. Thank you, John. Lots of things to think about and feel and see, I guess. I'm standing here to get my live streaming friends, whom I didn't welcome before. Hello. Live streamers actually have a chance to ask a question easily by just texting it, putting it into the chat channel. If you're live streaming and you can't find the chat channel, it probably means you don't have an account, which you could probably find very easily by just going onto YouTube. There's actually a question already on the live stream, which I'll ask in a moment. But we want to give you a chance, give you the microphone and ask the question you want. Disagree?
Yeah.
Make a comment, and we'd love to hear from you. Question right over here. Be nice to hear your name. If you don't want to say your name, just say John or something. How it'll work. I'm going to hold it for you.
John, that was absolutely fantastic. So my neighbour, who's a very clever fellow, he says that Christmas is a pagan ritual that has, just has morphed into this religious event so the people in Europe who are all depressed in winter can cheer themselves up.
Yeah. Sure, he must have read that in one of those articles that I mentioned before. No, nobody thinks that. I mean, plenty of people think that, but no one who's studied it thinks that. Because we have documents from the very beginning of Christmas. Now, it is true that there was a Roman festival that coincided with, what became Christmas time. That was a really crazy festival celebrating the return of the sun, S-U-N. So the sun fades in winter and then slowly starts to come back. And that week that we would identify as Christmas week, around the 25th of December, was when they celebrated this over several days. And the festival was a sort of upside-down festival. Slaves were allowed to talk back to their masters for a few days, depending on how kind the master was. They were allowed to eat at the master's table. And so that was going on in the Roman world. And there was often lots of things that the Romans did better than most people during that period, the kind of licentiousness of the Romans. Now, what we have is Christians doing prayer vigils around that same time. But it seems either there are two arguments, and neither is the argument that they borrowed the Sol Invictus Roman ceremony. But one is they were actually calculating 9 months from an earlier festival in March 25th, when they felt, when they had celebrated the Annunciation, that Mary was declared to be pregnant. And so they counted forward and went 25 December. That's one theory. The other is Christians didn't want to be spoil sports and cancel any party while Rome was going nuts with its Sol Invictus ceremony, so they had their own prayer vigils on the 25th. But they were not, it didn't involve gift giving and all those sorts of things. It was just celebrating the birth of Christ. The other interesting thing is there's an even earlier evidence that they were celebrating what we call Christmas on the 6th of January, even earlier than that, and which is why you'll often find that the Orthodox, our Orthodox friends, celebrate Christmas on the 6th of January. Certainly our Armenian Orthodox do. Okay, so that's probably more information than you need, but it certainly isn't the case that it's just a pagan festival that Christians adopted.
And it's worth saying there that also the attempt to discredit the choice of the date December 25 or January 6 has nothing to do with the very message you gave us tonight. It wouldn't matter if the date was different. We're not even trying to defend the date. Is that right?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to defend the date. Because, I mean, even if that first theory is correct, that there was already a celebration of the Annunciation to Mary that she'd be pregnant, and they just counted 9 months forward. And that, right? Even if that's the case, they were just creating a calendar of celebration. Most Christians didn't actually think seriously about the birthday of Jesus. The much earlier festival was the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. We have evidence that they were doing that like from the very beginning, from the first decade. They were celebrating the Passover, which coincided with Easter. Christmas was a later festival, but only because they started to fill out the calendar of church services that you would have in honour of various people. Yeah.
And what is true is not the date.
Yeah, in some ways it's a little bit like, what's the horse's birthday? Is it the August the 1st?
Yes.
Yeah, so, we all celebrate the birthday of the horses, but we don't actually think all horses were born on the 1st of August, right?
It's the same with the Queen's birthday.
The Queen's birthday, yeah.
Classic.
She wasn't born on the Queen's birthday, which really messes with your head. But, it's a celebration nonetheless. Yeah.
This is?
Minto. I was just wanting to ask about calendar as well, because from what I can tell, Jesus was born in 4 to 6 BC, and I was just wondering how it became the AD calendar after that, like how it was confirmed.
Hey, you're asking me all the nerdy historical questions, which I love. Yeah, continue them on. Yes, so it's a fascinating thing that in the period in which Jesus lived, no one was talking about 1 AD, right? Or 28 AD or whatever. They would talk about the 15th year of Emperor Tiberius. That's how you'd measure it. We now know the 15th year of Emperor Tiberius coincides with our AD 28. But that's how people worked their calendars, the year of the reigning emperor. Okay? It got to the point where Christians got bored of calling their years by their emperors, and enough emperors were now Christians that they also felt a little bit weird about it. So the greatest mathematician in Rome in the year 525 was asked to calculate when Jesus was born, the year he was born, and we'd reset the calendars. His name, if you can believe it, was Dennis the Little. I kid you not, Dionysius Exiguus. And Dennis the Little was asked to do it, and he was a great mathematician, had all the Roman archives to play with, and he went through all the documents he could. He counted back the imperial years and ended up landing on a date that he thought was a pretty good shot of the year Jesus was born. And so they called that Anno Domini, the year of the Lord, 1. There was no 0, by the way, worth remembering. Yeah. I won't talk about the millenniums. Anyway, year 1. Now, the thing is, everyone started to reset their calendar across Europe. Year 1, right? And so we are now year 2020 from that, yeah? That's all. We now know Dennis the Little got it wrong. But not by much. by 4 or 5 years. We now know, beyond doubting, Jesus was born late 5 BC or early 4 BC. So yes, it messes with your head that Jesus was born before Christ. But just run with it, because we're just saying Dennis the Little did better than anyone else in the room could have done with the information he had. It's just that we now have a whole lot more information and we can pinpoint the date far more precisely.
You're kind of Dennis the Little right there. Hey, I'm here to say on live stream that I've only done one piece of graffiti in my life, and that was at the University of Sydney in the Fisher Library. I wrote a little message about Jesus, and I said he was born 4 BC, and he lived to 29 AD. I came back 2 days later, and someone said, "Idiot, he was born in 0 AD, don't you know?" And I'm like, oh dear, okay. Other questions? That chair has been taken away, and I repent of my sins. This is
Jean. John, thank you. Thank you very much. Look, we obviously can't dispute the fact that Jesus was born, lived, died. That's true. It's good, it's beautiful. But the thing that a lot of people really grapple with is the incarnation that you mentioned, the virgin birth, and that this Jesus was the Messiah, the promised Messiah of long ago, and that he then is this person who has made his appearance in the world. How do we explain some of those things to our non-Christian friends, or those who are really struggling to believe?
Yes. Well, again, I'd make the point that people are drawn to these things or repelled by them by logos, pathos, and ethos. So there's a whole bunch of factors going on. And I think it's perfectly valid for someone just to pick up a gospel and just read it and just see if it makes more sense of the world than if it were true, would it make sense of my world? A lot of people come to faith that way. It's not so much that they can prove the evidence, it's just that they read it and they go, oh my goodness, this lights up everything. C.S. Lewis, the famous Oxford Don, once said that I believe in Christianity the way I believe in the sun, S-U-N, not just because I see it, but because by it I can see everything else. And a lot of people, when they read the gospel, the life of Jesus, and they hear his teaching, and they see the narrative unfold and what it says, they find themselves thinking, if I believed this, these are the lenses that make sense of this crazy world. And I think it's a perfectly valid way to, affirm things. However, there are some more sort of historical and rational things that we can talk about. Maybe I'll get invited back at Easter, and we can do something about the resurrection. Because for me, it does come down to the resurrection. The evidence for the resurrection is precisely as good as you would expect if it really happened, and weirdly excessive if it didn't. And for me, if you can work back from that, it is the key that unlocks the whole thing. If you can find yourself thinking, oh my goodness, this resurrection really looks like it happened on historical grounds, then surely someone who rose again can be trusted on all the other things he said, including that he is God in the flesh, come to disclose God to us. So we can start there and work back to all these other things.
This here is
Bruce. John, I'm thinking of those academics in the history departments who believe that Jesus lived, that it's a true story, the gospel is true. How do you get them to move to the accepting the fact that he was God also? I mean, they made the first base, if you like,
Yes.
but they need to go a bit further.
Yes, so, believing that Jesus really lived, taught, had a reputation as a healer, and died by the order of the fifth governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, is just good intelligence. It doesn't require any faith. And that is the opinion of all, as I say, professors of classics and ancient history. But professors of classics and ancient history are just like every other normal human being. They're not just logos, they're not just a brain sitting in the head, they're also an ethos and a pathos. And for all sorts of other personal reasons that one doesn't talk about when one goes to Oxford and has sherry with the dons. You don't ask them those sorts of questions. You keep it at the level of the academia. But for sure, it's life experience that has led them toward or away. I will, however, add that Australia's most eminent ancient historian, in the opinion of everyone, is Edwin Judge, the most successful Roman historian Australia has ever produced. And he firmly believes in Jesus' resurrection and says prayers and is a Christian. The great professor of Greek and Roman history at Oxford University. This is the top of the tree in the field. She, Theresa Morgan, is also a devout Christian believer. So there are some that are, there are some that aren't. It isn't just all down to the mind. Yes.
Yes, which is in part what is true about Christmas, which is it is for everyone. I love that comment that it's the, what do you say, it's not the propaganda of the powerful, it's the testimony of the humble.
Yeah.
It really isn't just for elites. An academic and a carpenter has to decide whether they believe it or not. And
yes.
they're both from the same starting point in some
And
sense.
you know, the highly educated and highly intelligent need to be more careful than others over this. Because one of the things that's come out in recent psychological research about intelligence and belief formation is that intelligence gives you no advantage at arriving at the truth of a problem. You know what it gives you an advantage in? Rationalizing your preferred solution. The intelligent, high IQ people are much better at convincing themselves and others that their view is right. So actually, sometimes I think being highly educated and hyper-intelligent is a defect. It's potentially a defect.
Jesus said similar things about wealth, but I guess that's another
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Same sort of idea.
Yeah.
This is...
Irene. Hi, John. I agree that this story of Christmas is like true, good, and beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily draw a person to believe in it, right? Even though it just it's like a fact, like okay, it's an objective fact that is true, good, and beautiful. But how does it matter to you? Like, why is it relevant to you? Right? It's just like okay, Donald Trump existed in the world, but we know he existed, but he doesn't really matter to us, or yeah.
If you thought Donald Trump was true, beautiful, and good, what would but you didn't want to vote for him. I guess that's the thing there. You can decide true, beautiful, and good, but what next? Is that what you mean? You can decide that Jesus is, or the birth of Jesus is true, beautiful, and good, but then what next? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think the question is, people can arrive at thinking it's true, thinking it's good, thinking it's beautiful, and then do nothing with that, and just doesn't really affect my life. Yeah. So I would say that's true. I would concede it's possible to get to the point where you think it's probably true, you can see that it's really good, and it is beautiful, makes you feel warm and fuzzy. I would say that the distraction of our world can keep many true, good, and beautiful things from our lives, and it's really sad. I mean, people can think about charity, like genuine charity, when you know your money is definitely going to the poor, the actual desperate poor, okay? I know that lots of people want to quibble about all sorts of, should it be foreign aid? Forget about that. Your money's going to the poor. You would know that is true, good, and beautiful. And you don't do it. I know you don't because I don't. Not to the degree that I think it's true, good, and beautiful. I don't. So what's going on there? Distraction, selfishness, lack of virtue in my life, and not giving space and time to let these things sink in. And so this is the beautiful thing about the Advent season. It's a whole month almost for people to ponder these things. And so here we are at the front of Advent, the front of the Christmas season. Take these weeks to actually ponder them, because if they're true, good and beautiful, they ought to transform our lives. Because, as I said earlier, the difference it makes is this. I wake up in the morning knowing, despite everything, I am loved by the God of the universe who entered into the world for me. That is an animating principle for life.
You can only know that in part through the door of Christmas? Is it what?
No, I mean, you can learn it any old week here at St. Philip's.
But I just mean that Christmas, to know that you're loved by God, Christmas is an integral part of that.
It is a special season because, especially if the church helpfully points out that this beautiful nativity scene that we sing about and we read about is God. I mean, this is what I find so compelling about Augustine's remarks. If you can get yourself to think, give yourself the space in this busy, noisy world to think, he lies in a manger, but he holds the world in his hand. He is nourished at the breast, but he feeds the angels. He is wrapped in swaddling clothes, but he clothes us with immortality. He is suckled, but is adored. He does not find room in the inn, but he makes a temple for himself in our hearts. For strength took on weakness, that our weakness might become strong. Therefore, let us marvel at, rather than despise, his human birth. So it's that kind of reflection that I think moves us through to another point.
There's a question on the live stream. Can I just attend to that first? It's from somebody in Melbourne. There you go. And the question's about weariness and rejoicing.
Weariness and rejoicing.
Well, it's a weary world, and yet we're called to rejoice.
And Melbourne has experienced
weary.
weariness and now great rejoicing.
That's right. The question is, what was life like for the average Jewish person that Jesus was born into? Were they comfortable? Were they thirsty or thirsting for a rescuer, like a vaccine for the situation they're experiencing? Were they weary looking for something?
What a lovely way of putting the question. Well, of course, there were many people in Jesus' day in Galilee and Judea, and they were as varied as we are. So it's really hard to say they were all like this. However, we can say a few things. We can say that, especially Galilee, where Jesus was from, they were not as poverty-stricken as we imagine. Galilee, if you've been there, is beautiful and bountiful and fertile. And Jesus was surrounded by the goodness of creation. So they did have their needs mostly met. It wasn't the kind of poverty that we imagine. Of course, it's not the kind of wealth that we imagine either. There was political turmoil as a result of the Roman presence. And so Jews in Galilee and Judea were frustrated, mostly, that the Romans were present. And so they felt politically oppressed. And in this context, Jews talked about the coming anointed one, the Messiah. In Hebrew, Mashiach means anointed one. The Greek way of saying that is Christos, anointed one, Christ. So this Messiah or Christ was being talked about in Jesus' day. But the interesting thing is, our evidence suggests they were wanting a military and political leader who would deal with the Roman problem. And we have lots of evidence of this.
Government.
The government. The government's the problem. Get a new government, that'll fix it. But this is how they were thinking. And this is why Jesus was so weird to people. And they were often thinking, who is this? Because he didn't say, take up your arms and let's fight the Romans. Instead, he said, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. People in Galilee were thinking, are you saying Romans? Love Romans? And then he ends up dying on a cross at the hand of the Romans. And yet this is the key that unlocks the whole show. So yes, there was a longing for the problem to be fixed. But what Jesus actually came and did is he fixed the deeper problem, because the problem wasn't the Romans. The Roman heart, the Jewish heart, the Greek heart, our lack of virtue, our fallenness, that's the problem.
We've got time for one or two more. This is...
Kate. Thanks, John. Really what I'm wanting to ask is, I know people that say, yeah, they can accept that the resurrection probably happened, and yeah, Jesus, yeah, is good, he does good, but his view on the ethic of what it is to be human is the thing they really find repulsive. How dare he say how we to live? How dare is he to judge our age? And it's such a brick wall that I feel like I can't get through.
Yes. Well, there's bound to be some logos, pathos, and ethos going on there. You know, people can be repelled by this idea simply because their life doesn't accord with what Jesus demanded, and so that's inconvenient. That can be a level. Or we can feel outraged about the implications for others, maybe. But the central ethic of Jesus was love. Yeah? He said, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, and he took it all the way to the cross where he loved his enemies. And so I guess I would want to urge such a person who finds themselves repelled to start there and work out. And start to try and see everything that Jesus said as anchored in love, because it can be. And I think as you use your imagination to think that everything Jesus said actually goes back to love, a love that wasn't just arbitrary, a love that actually he embodied in his birth into a manger right through to the cross. It's that self-giving love. And once you see that, it unlocks everything else. And I think we can find ourselves drawn to accept him even on the difficult things, the more you're convinced that his interests are our interests, which is, going back to Aristotle, we believe those we trust. And if you find yourself trusting Jesus, you'll believe all the things that he said.
Okay. Thank you, John. Do you want to give him one more? Here we go. This is...
Thanks so much, John, for your talk. My name is Amy, by the way. You mentioned distractions and being distracted from what is true, good, and beautiful. What advice can you give to someone who let their faith fall by the wayside and is distracted?
Yeah. I want to just say a very simple thing, time. Because the interesting thing is, we fill our heads for hours a day with social media, with Netflix, and of course with the other things we have to do, work, study, whatever. And maybe give 2 minutes to the thought about God. And then wonder why the things we've given 18 hours in the day seem more real than the thing we gave the scraps of our time. And so people say, oh, religion's brainwashing. I want to say, hardly. The brainwashing is happening all the time on social media, in the media. That's where the brainwashing is going on. Drip, 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 drip. Constant. If you were to give 15 minutes of your day to reflection, prayer, reading the Bible, 15 minutes a day, your life would change radically. See, the thing is, Christianity doesn't need brainwashing. It doesn't need to brainwash you. 15 minutes a day can be the light that animates everything.
Thank you, John. It's funny, there's something about being in church that makes clapping, I don't know what it is. It's all right. 15 minutes a day is something we can help you with. And there's a couple of things you can do on the back of what you just heard. Number one, something right now. Stick around. Plenty of food up the back. Grab another glass, chat with some people who brought you. That's one way to do it. For some of you, you're like, you know what, I loved being here. I'm not sure if I'd step back in. That's okay. We really appreciate that you're here. There are ways in which you could spend a bit of time on your own. One of them is to take the book, Why Christmas, to ponder a little more of the story. But if you wanted to also look at many of the resources that John produces, then johndickson.org is certainly a way to do it. Take the book, the free one that we want to give to you. You could also Google his name and find his podcast, Undeceptions, which is a breathtaking podcast with all sorts of things to make you think and challenge you and to turn moments upside down and reconsider. That's another thing that's genuinely worth doing. That's if you want to go home and do these things on your own. But we'd love you to do them with us as well. And so we want to extend an invitation to you. You'll receive on your way out a card, if you haven't already, which tells you the Christmas services that we have coming up. Namely, on the 13th of December, just so you know, by the way, on the 13th of December, this church is building trust with the homeless. And we've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. And on the 13th of December at 1 o'clock, we eat with them for 2-3 hours, and it's magnificent. If you want to talk to us about that, then see Paul on your way out. Is Paul around? Step right in the middle, Paul, so we can see you. Perhaps you should stand right near the Christmas tree. Paul would love to talk to you about that. But we want you to come on the 13th at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock down at the Garrison Church for a carol service. 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock, they're the same service. Down at the Garrison Church. We used to do it in one service and pack it in, but COVID doesn't let us. So instead of having one service for a carol service for our community, 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock on the 13th of December. But if you want to hear John again, then we'd love you to come on Christmas Eve. And John is speaking at a number of the services that will take place here and one at the Garrison Church on Christmas Eve. And that's all on that card that you'll be given in on the way out. We'd love to tell you more about it, so please contact us. On our website is the Contact Us webpage, and you could go to menu, click down, contact us. I was there tonight. I'd love to hear more, and we'll send you information about the services, how they're all a little bit different, which ones John's speaking at, which ones are being live streamed, so to find which ones are suitable and perfect for you. That's Christmas Eve as well as Christmas Day. So we'd love you to either stay around now, ponder yourselves, take those 15 minutes, or come back and join us during the season. Is there anything I've missed, Paul? You let me know. Is that it? Okay, bless you. Music will come on, or singing. I'm not quite sure what's happening. But in this time, enjoy more food and drink and the hospitality.